13th Warrior, 1999, promised to be a gritty Viking epic. But behind the shields and fog was one of Hollywood's darkest disasters. What unfolded off camera was a battle just as fierce as the one on screen. Fact 1.
There is only one God, and Muhammad is his.
The 13th Warrior began as an ambitious adaptation of Michael Crichton's novel, Eaters of the Dead. It had Antonio Banderas at his prime, John McTiernan in the director's chair, and a studio ready to bet big. But the dream turned into a nightmare when delays, rewrites, and test screenings went wrong. The budget ballooned from $80 million to over $160 million, shocking Disney executives. Audiences found it too dark, too confusing, and too slow. What was meant to be a brutal adventure became a costly catastrophe. McTiernan's vision was grim and grounded, but the studio wanted something heroic and flashy. The clash between art and commerce tore the project apart. Crews waited for direction that never came. Reshoots stretched on for months, burning through millions. Executives panicked as the movie sank deeper into chaos. By the time filming ended, no one knew who was in charge anymore. Even the editors disagreed on what story they were telling. Disney hid the disaster under layers of rebranding. But that only made things worse, because when the studio lost faith, Michael Crichton took control himself, and that's when the real war began behind the camera. Fact 2.
Shouldn't we stay closer to land? Oh boy, this is no day to be close to land.
After disastrous test screenings, Disney fired McTiernan and handed control to the story's author, Michael Crichton. The move shocked Hollywood. Authors almost never direct their own adaptations. Crichton ordered massive reshoots, rewrote entire scenes, and even changed the tone of the movie. He wanted something slower, more mysterious, and rooted in realism. McTiernan had crafted a violent myth. Crichton turned it into an anthropological study. The two visions clashed completely. Crew members described the tension as a Cold War on set. Crichton brought in a new composer and editor, replacing much of McTiernan's work. Some actors were called back months later to redo entire storylines. Even Banderas wasn't sure whose movie he was in anymore. Disney executives stopped visiting the set altogether. What emerged was a hybrid, half McTiernan, half Crichton, belonging to neither. When it finally tested again, reactions were only slightly better. Both men disowned the final version, but Crichton's fingerprints were all over it, and his obsession with blending myth and history would shape everything that followed. Fact 3.
What is that? Would be silent.
The film's foundation comes from Beowulf, the oldest surviving epic poem in English history. Michael Crichton reimagined it through a scientific lens, asking, what if Beowulf was real and witnessed by an outsider? That outsider became Ahmad ibn Fadlan, a real 10th century Arab diplomat who recorded his travels among Norse tribes. Crichton fused two worlds, Islamic scholarship and Viking superstition. The result was a strange blend of anthropology, horror, and legend. Hollywood didn't know what to make of it. Was it a monster movie or a historical drama? The studio wanted spectacle. Crichton wanted authenticity. This creative tug-of-war defined the film's identity crisis. Still, the concept gave it a haunting originality unseen in typical sword and sandal movies. The idea of one educated man documenting a barbaric world fascinated Crichton. He called it a bridge between civilization and chaos. That contrast became the heart of the story, and the tension that swallowed the production whole. But bringing that world to life required the right lead, and that choice nearly caused another fight. Fact 4. Antonio Banderas wasn't the studio's first choice for Ahmad ibn Fadlan. Executives wanted Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, or even Val Kilmer. John McTiernan insisted that Banderas had the right intensity for a man caught between cultures. The actor trained for months to master the physicality and accent. He learned Arabic phonetically, studied Islamic customs, and trained with historians. His preparation impressed everyone. Even the consultants said he carried himself like a scholar among warriors. But the shoot tested his endurance. Filming in freezing rivers, mud, and rain for weeks left the cast battered. Banderas called it the hardest film I've ever done. His armor weighed over 25 kilos, and the fur costumes trapped water and mud. Crew members joked that the real enemy wasn't the Wendell, it was hypothermia. Yet through it all, Banderas stayed professional, bringing warmth and humanity to the chaos. His calm presence grounded the film. Still, even his dedication couldn't fix what was coming, because the title itself soon became a disaster of its own. Fact 5.
Very soon, you will be.
Originally, the movie was called Eaters of the Dead, just like Crichton's novel. Test audiences reacted with horror. Some thought it was a zombie film. Disney panicked, thinking the title would sink the movie before it even opened. Executives ordered a full rebrand, choosing the 13th Warrior to sound more heroic. The decision came so late that posters, props, and credits had to be redone. The change cost millions and delayed marketing by months. Crichton hated the new title, calling it generic and soulless. McTiernan agreed. For once, the two rivals were on the same side. Even cast members were confused when they saw new promotional material arrive. Some international distributors kept using the old name, creating chaos worldwide. The dual identity symbolized everything wrong with the production. No one knew what the film really was anymore. It wasn't horror, it wasn't fantasy, and it wasn't pure history. It was everything and nothing. And as the confusion grew, the weather on set turned the production from miserable into survival. Fact 6. Filming took place in British Columbia and Vancouver, where the weather changed every hour. One moment, there was bright sunlight, the next, freezing rain and fog. Scenes had to be reshot constantly to keep continuity. The mud became so deep that crew members lost boots in it. Horses slipped, armor rusted, and camera gear short-circuited from moisture. Banderas said, "Every day felt like a war, but without glory." Temperatures dropped below zero during night shoots, turning breath into clouds on camera. The rain made the Viking costumes weigh twice as much. Extras wrapped themselves in plastic between takes just to stay warm. The constant dampness caused real illness across the cast. Production medics were on set daily treating hypothermia and infections. Ridley Scott once called Gladiator mud and sweat, but this movie was worse. Crew nicknamed the set Mudheim. The harsh conditions added to the film's gritty realism, but morale began to collapse. Even the director's patience started to erode, because every ruined day meant millions lost. And soon that money would vanish into something far scarier. Reshoots. Fact 7. What began as a 90-day shoot stretched to nearly 200. The constant weather delays and creative disagreements created chaos in scheduling. Crichton ordered massive reshoots after McTiernan's cut tested poorly. New scenes were filmed months later under completely different conditions. Matching light and scenery became a nightmare. Some actors had already cut their hair or started other projects. The film's tone shifted with every edit, part horror, part historical drama, part adventure. Disney executives watched the budget spiral past $160 million. It became one of the most expensive flops in history. Crew members joked they could have built a real Viking village for less. The constant rewrites made actors lose track of what story they were telling. Antonio Banderas later said, "We shot 3 different endings and no one knew which one they'd use." Crichton's control over the project grew obsessive. McTiernan was banned from the editing room entirely. And when both versions were finally compared, no one agreed which one was worse. But the chaos behind the scenes wasn't just about money, it was about monsters. Fact 8. In the film, the terrifying Wendell warriors are depicted as primal, near-supernatural creatures. But in Crichton's novel, they're actually Neanderthal remnants, prehistoric humans still surviving in secret. Early versions of the movie leaned heavily into this concept, showing them as cave-dwelling cannibals. Test audiences, however, thought they were too weird and confusing. Crichton rewrote their scenes to make them more ambiguous, half legend, half myth. The result lost some of the horror edge that made the novel unique. McTiernan had filmed them like shadows, using smoke and flame to hide details. Crichton added close-ups and rituals, breaking the mystery. The new version left neither camp satisfied. Even Banderas said, "We didn't know who we were fighting anymore." The ambiguity made the film atmospheric, but emotionally distant. Some fans still debate what the Wendell were meant to represent, man's past or man's fear. Either way, they became the symbol of the movie's identity crisis. And just when you thought that was the strangest thing, something even creepier happened. The crew thought the set itself was cursed. Fact 9. From the beginning, strange accidents haunted the production. Equipment broke constantly without explanation. Fires started on props, even in the rain. Several crew members were injured in freak mishaps. One lighting technician fell and broke his leg on the same day 2 others were hospitalized. Locals joked that the Viking gods were angry. Rumors spread that the replica village was built on ancient burial grounds. The crew laughed nervously, but morale dipped lower each week. Some actors swore they saw shadows moving through the fog between takes. One night, a generator exploded right after a priest blessed the set for safety. The insurance company nearly pulled out, calling it a bad luck shoot. Even Crichton joked that the movie was possessed by Odin. Whether it was bad luck or poor planning, the accidents became legend. The curse fueled the cast's paranoia, but also bonded them like real warriors. Still, the damage was done. The delays, fear, and costs had piled too high. The studio finally stepped in, and what they did next sealed the movie's fate forever. Fact 10. When the final cut was delivered, Disney executives were horrified. The film was too dark, too violent, and completely unmarketable. They cut the promotional budget to almost nothing. Posters were scarce, trailers were limited, and release dates were shifted quietly. Most people didn't even know the movie existed until it appeared in theaters. Disney hoped to minimize the losses by keeping expectations low. The marketing team called it damage control disguised as strategy. Even the soundtrack was released months late, adding to the confusion. Critics barely received early screenings and reviews were lukewarm at best. The film was buried under the shadow of bigger hits like The Matrix and The Mummy. In the end, it earned less than $60 million worldwide, a fraction of its cost. It became a cautionary tale for studios about creative control and risk. But what they didn't expect was that years later, the movie would rise again, gaining cult status among fans who saw the beauty buried beneath the chaos. And that's where the story truly begins to turn. Fact 11. John McTiernan, the man behind Die Hard and Predator, vanished from publicity during the chaos. While Crichton oversaw reshoots, McTiernan refused all interviews. Crew members said he walked the set like a ghost, quiet and cold. His crew loyalty stayed strong. Most refused to speak against him. He believed the original cut was his best work, darker and more psychological. That version, nicknamed Eaters of the Dead, the director's cut, was locked away by the studio. Insiders claim it was leaner, bloodier, and far more terrifying. McTiernan never saw it released. Disney buried it deep in their archives. Years later, editors who worked on the footage confirmed its existence. They said it had more focus on Viking superstition and survival horror. The studio found it too disturbing for mainstream audiences. McTiernan's silence became its own statement. He never directed another major hit again until the Thomas Crown Affair. His frustration over the 13th Warrior haunted his career for decades. Fans still campaign to see his version, and if that cut ever surfaces, it might finally reveal what Hollywood was too scared to show. Fact 12. The original score was composed by the legendary Jerry Goldsmith, known for Alien and Star Trek. He created an epic, percussive soundscape filled with ancient rhythms and haunting chants. But when Crichton took over, he scrapped nearly all of it. A new composer, Graham Revel, was brought in to rewrite the soundtrack from scratch. The tone shifted from mythic to minimalist, trading drums for atmosphere. Goldsmith's original score was shelved for years and thought lost. Bootleg copies surfaced later, and fans were stunned by how different it sounded. His version felt alive, wild, primal, and heroic. Critics now say the Goldsmith score could have changed the movie's legacy. Even Revel admitted that cutting it was a mistake. Crichton wanted realism, not melody, but it drained the emotion out of several scenes. The final mix feels cold, almost hollow compared to Goldsmith's fire. To this day, collectors still search for the complete recordings. A few tracks eventually leaked online, giving a glimpse of what could have been. But the tragedy of lost music wasn't the only ghost haunting this production, because one cast member suffered a real on-set injury that nearly ended his career. Fact 13. During one of the film's chaotic battle sequences, a stunt went terribly wrong. Actor Vladimir Kulik, who played the Viking leader Bulewyf, was injured while performing a sword fight. A stuntman's blade missed its mark and sliced his hand open. The wound required stitches, but Kulik refused to stop filming. He wrapped his hand in leather and continued shooting for the rest of the week. The pain added a raw intensity to his performance. He later joked, "Bulewyf was bleeding, and so was I." The production's medic wanted to shut down the scene, but Kulik insisted. The director filmed around his injury, using close-ups to hide the bandages. His dedication impressed the entire crew, who started calling him the real warrior. The injury became part of the movie's legend, one more sacrifice for authenticity. Kulik later said the set felt cursed but honorable. His battle scars gave weight to every frame he appeared in. It reminded everyone that this film wasn't just pretending to be brutal, it really was. And while he fought through pain, Antonio Banderas faced a different kind of challenge, surviving the dialogue itself. Fact 14. Banderas had to deliver dialogue in archaic English, Old Norse, and Arabic, none of which he spoke fluently. He spent hours memorizing phonetic lines before every scene. Sometimes he didn't even know what the words meant, relying on emotion instead. Crichton wanted linguistic authenticity, even if it slowed the pace. The result was impressive but exhausting. Scenes took hours longer to film because of pronunciation corrections. Banderas said it felt like acting in 3 languages with no translator. The crew often applauded him after long takes just for finishing his lines. His accent gave the character a believable outsider's charm. However, some critics misinterpreted it as inconsistent acting. They didn't realize how much effort it took to blend so many languages naturally. The transition scene, where Ibn Fadlan slowly understands the Viking speech, became one of the film's most brilliant moments. That moment of connection symbolized the bridge between cultures. And yet, ironically, the film's own production never found that bridge behind the camera. The language of art clashed with the language of money, and what came next broke even the toughest Viking spirits. Fact 15. By the end of filming, exhaustion turned to rebellion. Crew members were overworked, underpaid, and tired of endless reshoots. Some refused to continue unless schedules improved. The union nearly intervened after reports of unsafe conditions during night shoots. Crichton pushed for more realism, while the production team begged for rest. Assistant directors described the set as a battlefield of egos. Several technicians quit before filming wrapped. Others stayed out of loyalty to Banderas and the Viking actors. Rumors spread that Disney considered shutting the entire project down, but with so much money already spent, they limped to the finish line. The last few days of shooting were a mix of exhaustion and relief. Cast members hugged, unsure if their work would ever be seen. One stuntman said, "We survived a war movie by living through one." When it was finally over, the set fell eerily silent. Everyone knew this wasn't just another flop. It was a legend in the making, and legends don't die easily, because what happened after release was even more unexpected. Fact 16. When The 13th Warrior finally hit theaters in August 1999, disaster struck instantly. It opened to just $10 million in its first weekend, crushed by The Sixth Sense and The Blair Witch Project. Critics called it beautifully shot but emotionally empty. The audience didn't understand what kind of film it was: history, horror, or fantasy. Word of mouth evaporated within days. The movie's worldwide total stalled at under $62 million, far below its $160 million budget. It became one of the biggest flops in Disney history. Executives quietly pulled marketing and moved on. McTiernan didn't attend the premiere, and Crichton avoided interviews. The film was dead on arrival, or so everyone thought. But something strange happened after it left theaters. Fans discovered it on VHS and DVD, where its slow pace suddenly felt hypnotic. The cinematography, sound, and atmosphere began to gain cult appreciation. Viewers started calling it the thinking man's Viking film. What Hollywood saw as a disaster, fans saw as misunderstood art. And that second life gave the movie a redemption no one saw coming. Fact 17. Years after its failure, the 13th Warrior started gaining an underground following. Film forums and online communities dissected its themes and history. People praised its authenticity, its haunting score, and its meditative tone. They noticed details lost in theaters: the craftsmanship of the armor, the realism of the rituals, the intelligence behind its silence. Historians began referencing it in documentaries about Norse culture. The film's flaws became part of its charm. Viewers admired that it didn't spoon-feed the audience or glamorize violence. It felt raw, ancient, and strangely spiritual. Even critics who once dismissed it began re-watching it with new respect. Blu-ray releases spread its reputation globally. Fans started campaigns demanding a director's cut. Petitions circulated for Disney to release McTiernan's original version. What was once a flop now lived as legend. Its rediscovery proved that time can heal even Hollywood's deepest wounds. And that newfound love sparked a debate that still burns to this day. Which version of the story was the real one? Fact 18. Two cuts of the 13th Warrior exist: McTiernan's original and Crichton's final release. McTiernan's version, insiders say, was darker, faster, and more brutal. Crichton's edit slowed the pace and added cultural exposition. The difference was night and day. Fans argue endlessly about which version is closer to Crichton's original novel. McTiernan's cut is said to contain more character depth and stronger mythological tension. Crichton's, however, emphasizes Ibn Fadlan's outsider perspective. Both versions tell the same story, but with completely different hearts. To this day, Disney refuses to release the original cut, citing archival and rights issues. Rumors persist that a rough copy still exists in studio vaults. Editors who worked on the film confirm it. They saw it with their own eyes. The lost cut has become a kind of cinematic holy grail. Every few years, new fans demand its release, and if it ever surfaces, it might change the film's history all over again. But the real tragedy isn't the lost footage, it's what happened to the men who made it. Fact 19. After the 13th Warrior, nearly everyone involved faced professional setbacks. John McTiernan's career never fully recovered. He faced financial troubles and later became embroiled in a Hollywood wiretapping scandal. Michael Crichton's directing ambitions ended. He never sat behind a camera again. Even Antonio Banderas hit a rough patch in his career after years of nonstop success. It was as if the movie carried a curse. Crew members joked that Odin demanded a price. The film's massive failure made studios wary of historical epics for years. Projects like Kingdom of Heaven and Troy struggled to get greenlit because of it. Hollywood learned that mixing myth and realism was dangerous territory. But over time, the cast and crew began to embrace its legend instead of running from it. They started attending conventions, proud of what they endured. The so-called curse turned into a badge of honor. And in the end, what was once considered failure became something far more powerful. Myth. Fact 20. Today, the 13th Warrior stands as one of cinema's most misunderstood masterpieces. It's studied in film schools for its practical effects, cultural detail, and tonal ambition. Its story of outsiders uniting against darkness feels more relevant than ever. Modern critics call it a flawed but fearless piece of art. What once embarrassed a studio now inspires filmmakers who dare to take risks. Its haunting visuals, muddy realism, and quiet power endure. Fans continue to quote Banderas' transformation from scholar to warrior. The movie reminds us that heroism isn't loud. It's survival in silence. 25 years later, people still rediscover it and wonder how it failed. It's a cautionary tale, a war story, and a miracle of persistence. Even through its chaos, it carries a strange beauty. The legend of the 13th warrior proves that no film ever truly dies. Some just need time to be understood. And if you thought this Viking saga ended here, think again, because its legacy is still sharpening its blade in the dark.